We'll start things off with a lighter one. Many people know what eels are, even if you've never seen one in person. Maybe you were one of the people whose first run-in with an eel was this one, like me, and it gave you nightmares ever since. Regardless, eels are fascinating creatures, and that point isn't proven any more clearly than with the mystery of the New Zealand longfin eel. These eels can climb ladders, have see-through larvae, and can live longer than 100 years old. But the biggest mystery when it comes to these creatures is much more interesting. Worldwide, there are 16 species of freshwater eels residing in lakes, rivers, and estuaries. The New Zealand longfin eels are some of the largest and oldest of these species, and their life cycle is still a mystery, even to most marine researchers and scientists. These eels are often spotted in appropriate bodies of water around New Zealand. They spend much of their adult life in freshwater. However, initially they're born in the ocean, and at the later stages of their adult life, these eels will return to the ocean in order to mate. A 5 to 6 month trip. They mate only once at the end of their life in a deep ocean trench. Once the new eggs are fertilized, the old eels die. Then when the babies are born, they eventually make their way back to the inland waterways of New Zealand. So the question is, where do these eels mate? It seems like a simple question, doesn't it? Just follow them when they leave New Zealand to go back to the ocean to mate. But despite many efforts by researchers, they can't seem to locate the mating site, being estimated to be somewhere near the Tonga Trench, the second deepest trench in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, besides the famous Mariana Trench. Marine researchers have even tried using tracking tags to discover the hidden mating location, but this too failed. With many of the tracked eels dying during the journey, some of the tags being dislodged, and the rest succumbing to the pressures of the depths that these eels travel to. A secondary mystery to this is that when the eels are born, they're taken back to New Zealand waterways via ocean currents, where they go from larvae to freshwater adapted juvenile eels. But there has never been any sighting or collection of any actual larvae or eggs. Now again, this seems like an inconsequential mystery, but it is still fascinating, at the very least for the preservation of this eel species, which as of today is considered endangered. Space seems like a vast, endless chasm filled with planets and stars too numerous to count, name, or quantify, and yet, we know less about the depths of the oceans on our own planet than the space above us. That might be enough to creep you out, even just a little. The Horton Mine is located near Kingston, Nevada, a mostly abandoned area. A YouTuber named Frank, who at the time had already uploaded nearly 300 videos of himself exploring abandoned mines, decided he would visit the abandoned Horton Mine in 2013. Frank would typically explore these abandoned mines, talk to the camera while giving history and facts about the mines he was exploring, and then upload them to his YouTube channel. His trip to the abandoned Horton Mine would be no different. However, what he would witness at the Horton Mine would be enough for even him, a seasoned abandoned mine explorer, to turn around and leave immediately. Some history about the Horton Mine before we get into exactly what it was that Frank witnessed that day. The Horton Mine was constructed in the late 1980s and was primarily supposed to be for gold. However, it yielded primarily mercury and manganese. The entrance for the Horton Mine, which is around 20 feet high, is lined with copper supports fused in the rock. Upon entering the mine, there are chains hanging from the ceiling. These chains were originally used to hold up a conveyor belt system that was used to bring ore from inside the mine to outside the mine. And Frank would see all of these things as he made his way up to the Horton Mine entrance. But then, he observed something chilling.
Okay, here's a lower adit at the Victorine mine. I believe this was an older mine that once they dug the upper tunnels, this got incorporated into the same claim or whatever. I forget what this was called, this particular mine entrance here, but this one's got a little bit of water in it coming out of it. Not much. Okay, we can go in here and just take a quick look. I don't think I'm going to explore this particular mine. There's a little bit too much water in here, and I know this mine is really old, but Yeah, water in a mine. I do see other footprints here in the mud, but I just don't think it's wise to go in here when there's water. Try to avoid this if I can. I'm gonna have to step across here. Let me turn my light on. Okay, here's a shot looking down the adit from just inside the portal, and some water here and there. So I'll go up here just a little bit further and see if it dries out any. Okay, a little further inside the tunnel here. There's still water. You can see it really flowing here in front of me, right here, and this coming out here, out the tunnel. Yeah, this looks pretty sketchy. I'll go a few feet further in and check it out, but I think I'm going to pass on this one. This is one of the creepiest mine tunnels I've ever been in, just because of how dilapidated it is and all these chains hanging down from the overhead, and there's a shot looking down the tunnel even further, but still pretty wet. And taking a look around here back at the entrance, which is there. Okay, here's a shot looking back towards the entrance. I'm a little bit further in, and looking down the tunnel here. I don't know why that one chain is swinging back there. Don't know if you can see that in the video or not. Yeah, this mine definitely has a very spooky vibe to it. So I'm going to head back out and check out the other stuff that's here. This is just too wet and too muddy. And obviously something is making the chains swing. So time to get the hell out of here.
As his camera pans back to show the depths of the mine, Frank observes one chain eerily swinging on its own, while the rest of the chains remain perfectly still. This was enough for him to turn around and leave the mine and abandon the exploration he had planned. He went home, uploaded the video as he normally would, and went on with his explorations. A year later, this footage would go viral, prompting thousands of people theorizing and speculating as to what this could have been. Many conclude that the video is genuine, just based on Frank's reaction alone. He doesn't blow it out of proportion. He didn't do anything to try and make the footage go viral. He simply turned around, left, and uploaded it to his channel as he did 300 times before this. The most realistic, yet very unsettling explanation is that there was someone inside the mine who got there a little before Frank, who ducked out of view before Frank turned around to film inside the mine, nicking that chain just enough to cause it to sway like it did in the video. The question is, if it was an unknown person in the mine, what were they doing there? And what would have happened to Frank if he decided to venture further? As of the making of this video, Frank's channel, Abandoned Mines 11, is still active today. In April of 1943, near Worcestershire, England, 4 boys named Robert, Thomas, Bob, and Fred were playing around near a very large hill named Witchberry Hill. They were trying to find and collect eggs from birds' nests when they came across a large wych elm on some property that they weren't supposed to be on. A wych elm is a large elm that is very common in the British Isles. The boys figured that the tree would be a good place to find more birds' nests, and so they began climbing to see if they could find any. Bob, who was the first to climb and was higher than the other boys, got to a point in the tree where he was above a hollow section of the trunk, allowing him to look down into the trunk of this large elm tree. And when he looked down, he saw a human skull lodged in the hollowed-out trunk of the tree. It had teeth and even some hair stuck to it, so there was no doubt it was human. The boys didn't know what to do. They technically weren't supposed to be on this property, So to avoid getting into trouble, they left the skull in the hollowed-out Wych Elm tree and went home, agreeing between themselves that they weren't going to mention this discovery to anyone. Thomas, however, who was one of the older of the group, felt guilty about not saying anything, and eventually, he told his parents what the boys had found, which triggered an investigation by the local authorities into the mysterious skull in the Wych Elm. When authorities arrived at the tree, they found that more than just a skull was hidden inside this hollowed-out elm. There was a full skeleton, with shoes, a gold wedding ring, and even pieces of clothing, and the skull itself still had teeth and tufts of hair attached. So they took all of this evidence and sent it over to the Birmingham Forensic Office for analysis. The forensic expert determined that the deceased was a woman who had been dead for a year and a half, and that she likely had died of suffocation. However, they could not identify her. This inability to identify the woman was made worse by the fact that due to World War II happening at the time, there were so many other reports of missing people. A year later, in 1944, an eerie discovery was made on a wall near Birmingham. It was a sentence written in graffiti that read, "Who put Bella in the Wych Elm?" This graffiti implied that whoever wrote it knew the woman was in the tree, and that the woman's name was Bella. However, no one was ever questioned in regards to the original graffiti. It was speculated afterwards that a prostitute by the name of Bella, who worked nearby on the Hagley Road, was the unidentified victim, as she had gone missing years prior, but no hard evidence was found to substantiate this. To this day, the mystery of both the woman and the graffiti reading, "Who put Bella in the Wych Elm?" is still unknown. On June 13, 2001, Jason Jowlkowski, who was 19 years old at the time, was sitting at home with his 13-year-old brother. His parents were at work and his car was in the shop. That morning, Jason received a call from his boss asking if he could come into work early. Jason worked at a local Italian restaurant named Fazoli's. Jason was already scheduled to work at 5:30 p.m. that same day, but he decided he could use the extra hours and the extra money since he was saving to go back to school, and he said yes to working the lunch shift as well. Now, originally, his dad was going to drive him to his 5:30 p.m. shift at Fazoli's, but since his dad wasn't home, and Jason's car was in the shop getting repairs from some hail damage, Jason decided he would simply walk the nearly 4 miles to the restaurant. But upon learning that Jason was going to walk this substantial distance just to get to work, his coworker Teresa offered to pick him up. Jason agreed, and he told Teresa, who was also a previous classmate of his, to meet him at the Benson High School, where they both previously attended. Benson High School was around 8 blocks or half a mile from Jason's house. Both Jason and Teresa knew the location of the school, so it seemed like a reasonable meeting place. Jason then hung up the phone, got dressed for work, and headed out the door to walk to Benson High School to meet Teresa. Before he left, though, at around 10:45 a.m., Jason and his brother were seen by a neighbor pulling the trash cans from the street back to the house. After this, Jason began walking down the street towards Benson High School, and that is the last anyone would ever see of him. A little over 30 minutes later, Teresa called Jason's house from a payphone saying that he never showed up to Benson High School for the ride. This began the investigation into Jason's disappearance, which baffled investigators. One of the first things that was done was check the security cameras at the high school, but none of them showed Jason ever arriving. There was no evidence that pointed to the cause of this disappearance at all, and although investigators suspected foul play, there was nothing they could point to that would aid them in that theory. They canvassed the area, spoke to neighbors, but nothing ever came up. What could have caused Jason to disappear in broad daylight within blocks of his home? In the decades since Jason's disappearance, there have been almost no leads. However, there are many speculations as to what happened to him. Some believe he was the victim of a hit and run. A person driving recklessly hit Jason and rather than turn themselves in, did something to cover it up. Another theory is that someone called Jason into their home or into their car with the pretense of needing help before kidnapping and disposing of him. Jason had a mild learning disability and was very trusting of people, which could have allowed someone to take advantage of him. Yet another theory is that he fell down a manhole. Whatever the proposed theory, there may never be any definitive answers in this eerie disappearance.
Answers, no clues, just the reminder that it's been 20 years and no one knows what happened to Jason Jowlkowski.
There's no leads. Nobody saw anything. And, the detectives just didn't find anything. So there's no way of knowing.
That's Donnie say. She was 16 when her 19-year-old cousin disappeared. June 13th marks 20 years since Jowlkowski was unexpectedly called into work and agreed to meet his coworker at Benson High School for a ride.
And so he was last seen taking the trash cans into his house, and a neighbor saw him do that, and then his brother also looked out the window and saw him walking in the direction towards Benson, and he was never seen or heard from again.
I didn't realize it's been 20 years. That's a long time.
Chester Link, a former neighbor, says he was one of the last people to see him that day walking towards the school.
I don't understand how someone could just vanish with no trace, no foul play, nothing like that.
There's a tree at Roberts Park planted off the Keystone Trail in honor of Jowlkowski. Sunday afternoon, friends, families, and neighbors gathered to share memories, paint and hide rocks with the hashtag #FindJasonJ.
I remember one time he had this idea to do a popsicle race as which color would melt the fastest.
In 2006, Jennifer Kesse was living in a condo in Orlando, Florida, and working as a finance manager at Central Florida Investments Timeshare Company. On Sunday, January 22nd, she returned home with her boyfriend, Rob Allen, from a vacation to the Virgin Islands. Upon returning, Jennifer slept at her boyfriend's house in Fort Lauderdale Sunday night and drove straight to work on Monday morning, January 23rd. After a full day at work, Jennifer leaves at 6 p.m., and while she drives home, she calls her mom, who lived in Tampa, and talked to her on the phone, updating her on how her trip went and how much she felt like Rob was the one for her. She was really in love with him. She also later called her brother and father to share the same details with them. She arrives at her own home for the first time since she left on vacation a week before. And after dinner at around 10 p.m., Jennifer calls her boyfriend and the two talk for a little while. And despite how much Jennifer loved Rob and how smooth and fun their trip to the Virgin Islands had been, this call did not go well. Jennifer and Rob had a slight disagreement on the phone about the 3-hour distance between them, Rob living in Fort Lauderdale and Jennifer living in Orlando, and how this distance was really putting a strain on their relationship. Eventually, the two said goodnight, hung up, and went to bed. By 11 a.m. the next day, Jennifer's employer at the Central Florida Investments Timeshare Company realized that Jennifer never showed up for work that day. This was very uncharacteristic of Jennifer, so her employer, being unable to reach Jennifer by phone, contacted Jennifer's parents to let them know she was a no-call, no-show at work. This immediately caused her parents to be worried, because this was very much not Jennifer's normal behavior. In fact, they were so worried from hearing this news, they began driving from Tampa to Orlando to check on their daughter. During the drive, Jennifer's parents called the manager of her condo complex and asked him to do a welfare check on her. So he used a spare key to enter Jennifer's apartment and reported that Jennifer was not inside, but nothing seemed to be disturbed or taken from her apartment. He also did mention that Jennifer's car was not parked in the lot. While all this was happening, Jennifer's boyfriend, Rob, is also trying to contact Jennifer over and over again, but is unable to get through to her. A few hours later, at around 3 p.m., Jennifer's parents and brother arrive at her apartment. Upon entering Jennifer's apartment and looking around, they noticed that there were signs that Jennifer was home that morning and got ready for work. At this point, they called the police and tried to get an investigation started. And by 7 p.m. that evening, a detective is assigned to the case and begins investigating and questioning Jennifer's friends, family, and neighbors to see if any leads could be generated about her whereabouts. And at the same time, Jennifer's friends and family print out flyers with Jennifer's face on them to pass out and post around town. For the next few days, no leads were discovered that indicated Jennifer's whereabouts. However, more and more people started to become aware of Jennifer's missing persons case, and by Thursday morning of that same week, investigators got a call from the tenant of a nearby apartment complex that they felt would bust the case wide open for them. Around 8 a.m. on Thursday, January 26th, 2 days after Jennifer had gone missing, a tenant from another apartment complex about a mile away called the investigators after seeing a picture of Jennifer's car on the news. The caller claimed that Jennifer's car was parked and abandoned outside of their apartment complex, and it had been there for a few days. Police quickly head to the apartment complex to take a look for themselves, and upon arriving, they confirmed that, yes, this is Jennifer's car, a 2004 Chevy Malibu. Investigators photograph Jennifer's car and take it back to the station for forensic analysis. But during all this, they also discover something else that potentially could greatly assist them in this case. There were security cameras covering the lot where Jennifer's car was found abandoned. So investigators pull up the security camera footage and see something incredibly eerie. The footage, which was taken around noon the day she went missing on the 24th, shows an unknown man parking Jennifer's car, sitting there for a few seconds, and then exiting the car and walking away. His features were not clear on the security camera video, and since the man ended up walking parallel to the fence, his features become obscured, making him nearly impossible to identify. And since this was the type of security camera which did not record a full video, it just snapped a still image every 3 seconds, they had even fewer frames to work with to identify this mysterious person. The FBI was called in to assist with the investigation, but the only further information they could gather from the video was that the mystery phantom person was between 5'3" and 5'5". Eventually, even NASA was called in to try to assist in identifying the suspect, with no results. Upon searching the car, police found that nothing appeared to be stolen, which ruled out burglary as a motive for Jennifer's attacker/kidnapper. Here, the case would go cold on Jennifer's disappearance. 6 months later, an investigator named Joel Wright took over Jennifer's case. He developed a theory involving some contractors who were doing construction at her condo complex. These workers, who Jennifer had on a few occasions mentioned would make her feel uncomfortable while walking past them. They would catcall her and make comments at her as she went in and out of her condo. Many of them were undocumented, and as part of their contract for the project, they were given housing in empty condos in the complex for the duration of the construction project. This would have given them easy access to observe Jennifer for an extended period of time and get to know her schedule. Joel theorizes that on the morning of the 24th, Jennifer woke up, got ready for work, left her condo, locked her door, and as she was walking to her car was abducted by one of these workers, who later ditched her car at the other apartment complex a mile away. However, there were no solid leads or persons of interest in association with this theory. The case would go cold once again for 3 years, when Detective Wright decided to take a fresh look at the case and the evidence and re-interview various people regarding Jennifer's disappearance. One of the people he interviewed was an old housekeeper of Jennifer's. During that interview, Detective Wright showed her the security footage of the unknown individual who dropped off Jennifer's car. The housekeeper actually said that, judging by the clothing and gait of the person in the footage, he resembled a man known as Chino, who worked as a maintenance man in the condo complex. Now, this is the first Detective Wright ever heard of this person named Chino, and he didn't hesitate to follow up on the lead. He quickly discovered that Chino actually did some work on Jennifer's apartment the week she disappeared, and in addition, he dug up an old anonymous tip from when Jennifer first disappeared, and that anonymous tip suggested that Chino was involved. Detective Wright quickly tracked down Chino, who was actually serving time in prison for a statutory rape charge. In March of 2009, Wright interviewed Chino regarding Jennifer's disappearance, but he denied all involvement, and he even passed a polygraph test. So with no other evidence to suggest Chino was involved, this lead was eventually abandoned. 10 years after Jennifer went missing, the state of Florida had her officially declared dead, a heartbreaking blow to her family. And as it stands today, Jennifer's family has not abandoned the search for the person responsible for her disappearance. And as recent as 2024, dive teams have tried to use sonar on a nearby lake to try and find her remains. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Jennifer Kesse, please contact the Orlando PD or the Kesse family via their social media pages. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. And I did not forget, if you made it this far, that high five's for you. See ya.